Welcome back to Magic Muggle, a Harry Potter after show. This is your host, Eric Cicada, aka Mr. Honest, your resident Ravenclaw, broadcasting to you from the highest tower in Hogwarts. And today, we're diving into chapters 13 and 14 of Order of the Phoenix. Last episode was the beginning of Dolores Umbridge's reign at Hogwarts, and things went from uncomfortable to downright infuriating. Harry stood up in defense against the dark arts, refused to back down about Voldemort's return, and earned himself detention with the new professor. Meanwhile, Hagrid is still mysteriously missing. Everyone is settling into OWL year, which apparently means enough homework to make everyone miserable. I remember those days. And Hogwarts is slowly becoming a very different place than it used to be. These two chapters are where the change really starts to sink in. Let's jump into chapter 13, Detention with Dolores. The chapter opens in the Great Hall after Umbridge's class, and Harry immediately realizes the whole school already knows what happened. Everybody's whispering. Harry hears people saying he claims Cedric Diggory was murdered, and that he dueled Voldemort, and that he's making the whole thing up. What's especially frustrating is that just a couple months ago, everyone seemed willing to believe Dumbledore's version of events. Harry basically asks what changed, and Hermione gives what I think is a really important answer. She reminds Harry that nobody else actually saw what happened in the graveyard. So we are more with Harry's perspective than almost anyone in this school. You kind of have to think outside of Harry for this. All they had was Dumbledore's word. Then everyone went home for the summer, where the Daily Prophet spent 2 straight months calling Harry unstable and painting Dumbledore as an old man who's lost his mind. It's a reminder that propaganda works, and if people hear one message over and over again, even good people begin to question what they thought they knew. Harry isn't just fighting Voldemort anymore. He's fighting public opinion. Back in the Gryffindor common room, everyone is exhausted. Harry's headache is getting worse. Homework is piling up. Hermione can't stop asking the same question we probably are. How could Dumbledore allow Dolores Umbridge to teach defense against the dark arts? Harry points out the position has basically been cursed for years, but this is different. She's not incompetent. She's actively preventing students from learning how to defend themselves, and Ron catches something really disturbing. Umbridge openly encouraged the students to report anyone talking about Voldemort's return. She's not just teaching, she's spying, or trying to convince students to spy on each other. And that's a dangerous atmosphere to create inside a school, especially a wizarding one. Just when they try to settle into homework, Fred and George strike again. They've recruited a bunch of unsuspecting first years to test new joke products on. Fred and George definitely coming in clutch with comedic relief these chapters. Within seconds, kids are dropping unconscious all over the common room thanks to fainting fancies. Honestly, it's hilarious until you remember that these are 11-year-olds. Hermione certainly remembers. She absolutely unloads on Fred and George. They argue they're paying volunteers, and they tested everything on themselves first, so nobody's in real danger. But Hermione doesn't care. Then she delivers the one threat capable of terrifying the 2 Weasley twins. I'm writing to your mother. Game over. The look of horror on Fred and George's faces is incredible. Forget Azkaban. Forget expulsion. Mrs. Weasley finding out? That's true fear. That's just asking for a howler. Hermione's spew, SPEW mission also continues. She secretly leaves knitted hats around the common room, hiding them under scraps of parchment so unsuspecting house elves might accidentally pick them up and become free. Ron actually makes an interesting point here. He isn't arguing against freedom. He's arguing against tricking someone into freedom. Whether he's right or wrong, it's more nuanced than just dismissing Hermione's idea. It's another one of those little moral debates Rowling sneaks into the series. The next morning, Hermione proudly announces that the hats are gone. She immediately assumes the elves wanted freedom. Ron is considerably less convinced. He points out that they might not even look like hats, or maybe somebody simply cleaned them up. Either way, Hermione isn't speaking to him for a while. From there, we get something every 5th year at Hogwarts is apparently experiencing: OWL panic. Professor Flitwick, Professor McGonagall, eventually almost every teacher, they all deliver some variation of "these exams matter." No pressure, but your future depends on them. As if Harry didn't have enough already going on. Poor Neville doesn't even believe he can pass. But I love McGonagall's response. She tells him the problem isn't ability, it's confidence. That's such a McGonagall moment. She doesn't sugarcoat anything, but she sees potential in students long before they see it in themselves. The new lesson is vanishing spells, and they are brutal. Harry struggles, Ron struggles, Hermione vanishes her snail almost immediately. Business as usual. By lunchtime, everyone has even more homework than before, because apparently Hogwarts has collectively decided sleep is optional. Then, we finally head outside for care of magical creatures. Hagrid still isn't back. Instead, Professor Grubbly-Plink introduces Bowtruckles. And I have to admit, this is actually a really fun lesson. They're tiny little tree guardians that protect wand-quality trees. I love that. They're adorable until they decide to claw your eyes out. So maybe adorable isn't the right word. Hermione naturally knows every answer. Tree guardians, wood lice, fairy eggs. More points for Gryffindor. Everything's normal up until Malfoy opens his mouth. He immediately starts taking shots at Hagrid, suggesting he's gotten himself hurt doing something beyond his abilities. Now, here's something I really appreciated in this scene. Harry doesn't brush this off. He immediately wonders, does Malfoy actually know something? It's a fair concern, because Lucius Malfoy is a Death Eater. If anything had happened to Hagrid while he was away on order business, Harry can't completely dismiss the possibility that Draco has heard something. Hermione, thankfully, is the voice of reason, like always. She reminds Harry that if Dumbledore were truly worried, they'd probably know. And just as importantly, she tells Harry not to let Malfoy see that he's getting under his skin. That's exactly what Malfoy wants, especially because Malfoy is now a prefect. Unfortunately, Malfoy does not stop. He starts talking loudly enough for everyone to hear about the Ministry cracking down on substandard teaching. He's clearly talking about Hagrid. Harry squeezes the Bowtruckle so tightly that it slashes open his hand before escaping into the forest. It's such a small moment, but it perfectly shows where Harry's emotional state is. He's carrying so much frustration that it spills over into everything around him. Walking toward herbology, Harry says something that made me smile. He insists Hagrid is a better teacher than Professor Grubbly-Plink. Even though we literally just watched Grubbly-Plink give one of the most organized and informative care of magical creatures lessons we've ever seen, objectively, Grubbly-Plink is probably the better classroom teacher. But that's not really the point. Harry isn't defending lesson plans, he's defending someone that he loves. Sometimes loyalty isn't logical, it's personal. And I love the deep, extended look of their school day with the OWLs coming out. It definitely feels like we're living alongside these wizards and witches. Outside the greenhouse, we get one of my favorite Luna Lovegood moments. She walks directly up to Harry, no small talk, no awkward introduction, and simply says, I believe you know who is back. I believe you fought him. I believe you escaped. That's it. Imagine what Harry needed to hear at that moment. Everyone else is whispering, questioning him, laughing. Luna just believes him. No conditions, no hesitation. It's honestly one of the kindest things anyone has ever done for Harry since school started. Of course, Hermione immediately starts arguing with Luna about creatures like the crupple-horned Snorkack. It's kind of funny because they're both incredibly intelligent. They just define evidence completely differently. Luna walks away offended. Hermione thinks she's being sensible. Harry just quietly points out, maybe don't argue with one of the only people who's actually on my side. Then Ernie Macmillan surprises everyone in classic Ernie fashion. He makes sure the entire greenhouse can hear him. He loudly announces that he believes Harry completely because his family has always trusted Dumbledore. Ernie can definitely be pompous, but Harry genuinely appreciates hearing support from someone who isn't wearing radishes for earrings. And honestly, I don't blame him. At this point, he'll take allies wherever he can find them. By the end of the school day, Harry's exhausted. Homework is stacking higher, and he's starving. But then Angelina Johnson catches him. She absolutely unloads on him because his detention means he'll miss Keeper tryouts. No more Oliver Wood, by the way. Goodbye, Oliver. Wonder if we'll ever see him again. Harry tries explaining this wasn't his choice, and he didn't volunteer for detention. He got punished for telling the truth. And Angelina doesn't really care. As a Quidditch captain, she just needs her seeker present. Honestly, she's becoming Oliver Wood. Harry even jokes about checking whether Oliver died because she seems to be possessed by his spirit. That definitely made me chuckle a bit. And then Harry heads up to Umbridge's office. This scene, wow. The office itself tells you everything about Dolores Umbridge. Gone are Moody's magical devices. Gone are Lupin's fascinating creatures. Instead, lace, doilies, dried flowers, and enough kitten plates to haunt your nightmares. It's somehow one of the creepiest rooms in the entire series. Everything looks sweet. Everything feels fake. Everything is just designed to hide something ugly underneath, which is basically Umbridge herself. Already at this point of the book, she's just given away who she really is. Harry makes one of the last attempts to get out of Friday's detention. So he asks if he can attend Quidditch tryouts instead, and Umbridge smiles, and that's when Harry already knows the answer. She says something incredibly revealing. She likes that he's missing something important, because that's part of the punishment. This isn't discipline, it's cruelty. She is taking something away from him, and that's a huge difference. Then comes the punishment itself. Harry expects ordinary lines. Instead, Umbridge hands him a strange black quill, no ink, and told just to write. I must not tell lies. Harry writes a sentence and immediately feels searing pain. The words appear on the parchment using his own blood. At the exact same time, the sentence is carved into the back of his hand. This kind of shocked me. It's very abusive. It's definitely not okay that she's doing this to him. After he writes it, it heals, and he writes again, and it cuts again. He writes again, and it cuts again, hour after hour. Harry literally writes with his own blood while Umbridge calmly watches. This is one of the darkest punishments in the entire series, not because it's physically the worst thing Harry endures, but because of how ordinary Umbridge treats it. She isn't screaming, she isn't cursing him, she's smiling. Like, this is perfectly reasonable. That's what makes her terrifying. She's convinced herself she's one of the good guys. Harry never cries out, never gives her satisfaction, and when she finally is finished, she looks at the raw skin on the back of his hand and tells him, "It doesn't look like I've made much of an impression yet. Come back tomorrow and we'll continue." That line honestly gives me chills because Harry realizes this wasn't a one-time punishment. It's going to happen again and again and again. Harry finally leaves long after midnight. No homework finished, no Quidditch practice, no sleep. Just another reminder that life at Hogwarts has become something completely different. Harry decides not to tell Ron or Hermione what actually happened in detention. When Ron casually asks how it went, Harry just says lines. Technically, he isn't lying, but he's hiding the truth. And I think that's understandable. Sometimes saying something out loud makes it feel even more real. If Harry describes that blood quill, he has to admit to himself how cruel it really is, so he keeps it to himself. Unfortunately, keeping quiet has consequences. Harry is falling behind. He hasn't practiced vanishing spells, his homework is piling up, he's exhausted. And every night, he knows exactly what's waiting for him at 5 o'clock. Not detention, torture. And I think, personally, Umbridge might want him to just fail out of Hogwarts and get kicked out or something, because she must know about the homework load. It'd be one thing to let him do homework and sit in a room and like normal detention, you could do homework and stuff. But this is it's just cruel. But meanwhile, Angelina still thinks Harry is simply not prioritizing Quidditch. From her perspective, he keeps missing important team events. She doesn't know the truth either. So Harry ends up frustrated on multiple fronts. The teachers don't understand. His teammates don't understand. Even Ron and Hermione don't understand. The second detention is even worse. The cuts reopen faster. The skin stays irritated longer. Harry still refuses to make a sound. I really do actually admire Harry here. Not because suffering in silence is always the right thing to do. It usually isn't. But because this becomes a battle of wills. Harry decides if she wants me to break, she's going to have to work for it. And Umbridge is playing exactly the same game. That night, Harry finally gets back to the Gryffindor Tower after midnight. Instead of going to bed, he starts writing essays. He's absolutely drained, barely staying awake, trying to avoid detention from every other professor because of work he couldn't finish when serving detention. It's such a vicious cycle. The punishment itself creates reasons he'll be punished again somewhere else. Thursday arrives, another miserable day, another detention, and this time the cuts stop healing completely. The words remain carved into Harry's hand. I must not tell lies. Permanent. Or at least permanent enough for Umbridge to finally smile with satisfaction. She actually says, good, like she's proud of what she's done. It's horrifying. Walking back to Gryffindor Tower, Harry unexpectedly finds Ron hiding behind the statue. At first, it looks suspicious, then Ron finally admits what's been happening all week. He's been secretly practicing Keeper every single evening by himself. I absolutely love this scene because Ron expects Harry to laugh or give him a hard time or something, and instead Harry immediately gets excited. He tells Ron it's a brilliant idea and starts asking questions, builds him up. It's one of those friendship moments that doesn't really get talked about enough, especially when John was having that bit of jealousy last year. It's in book 4. Honestly, it's just good to see Harry have Ron's back and be cheering him on in something that they both can do together to be on the same team. Harry could have been completely consumed by his own problems. Instead, he genuinely celebrates Ron. Ron also admits why he kept it a secret. He's terrified Fred and George are going to make fun of him. Honestly, that's a pretty believable fear. Fred and George love Ron, but they also tease him relentlessly. So I completely understand why he wanted to quietly work on it before anyone really knew. Then, everything changes. Harry scratches his nose. Ron notices the back of his hand and immediately realizes those weren't ordinary lines. Harry finally tells him everything. The blood, the quill, the carving, everything. Ron is horrified, and he immediately wants Harry to go to Professor McGonagall or Dumbledore, anybody. Harry refuses, and this is just another interesting moment. Part of it is pride. Harry refuses to let Umbridge know she's gotten to him. But another part is much sadder. He says Dumbledore already has enough on his mind, yet we know that's not really why. The real reason is Harry still feels abandoned by Dumbledore. Since returning to Hogwarts, Dumbledore has barely acknowledged his existence. Harry isn't going to ask someone for help who won't even look him in the eye. That hurts. Friday finally arrives. Harry's last detention, at least. He hopes it's his last. The one little bright spot is that Umbridge's office overlooks the Quidditch pitch. If he shifts his chair, maybe, just maybe, he can watch Ron's Keeper tryouts. It's honestly heartbreaking. Harry spends the entire detention stealing tiny glances out the window, watching blurry figures, trying to guess which one is Ron, hoping, and cheering him on silently. While every sentence he writes tears his own hand open again. There's something really symbolic about that. Harry literally can't be there for one of his best friend's biggest moments because the Ministry has him chained to a desk. Eventually, night falls. Harry can't see the pitch anymore, and Umbridge calls him over. Grabs his arm, and suddenly, his scar explodes with pain. Not his hand, his scar. Immediately, Harry wonders, is Voldemort somehow connected to Umbridge? Is she being possessed like Professor Quirrell was? Controlled? Something feels wrong. Just absolutely wrong. He barely has the time to think before racing back to Gryffindor Tower. The common room erupts. Ron made the team, which made me happy. He's the new Gryffindor Keeper, and I absolutely love Ron's excitement here. He's practically throwing butterbeer at Harry. He's glowing. He's so happy, and after years of living in his brother's shadows, he finally has something that's his. Good for Ron. Seriously, he deserved this win. Angelina gives a quick update to Harry. Ron wasn't actually the best keeper that tried out. That's an interesting detail. 2 other students flew better. But one wasn't committed enough, and the other constantly complained. Angelina chooses Ron because she believes he'll grow into the role. It's another reminder that leadership isn't just about who's best today. Sometimes it's about who's going to become the best tomorrow. Hermione is half asleep because she's been knitting more elf hats. Harry barely reacts. His mind is just somewhere else at this point. He finally tells Hermione about the scar hurting when Umbridge grabbed him. Hermione immediately starts thinking logically. Could Voldemort really be possessing Umbridge? Probably not. He has his own body now. Maybe it's simply Harry's connection to Voldemort acting up again. Harry still isn't convinced because, let's be honest, Umbridge certainly feels evil enough. Hermione tells something to Harry that's really important. Tell Dumbledore. Again, Harry refuses, and then one sentence splits out. The only part of me Dumbledore cares about is my scar. Oof, that one hurts, because Harry doesn't even realize how much pain he's carrying anymore. And that's where chapter 13 leaves us. Harry carrying physical scars, emotional scars, and refusing to burden anyone else, which sets us up perfectly for one of my favorite chapters so far, in the early part of this book at least. Chapter 14, Percy and Padfoot. So, Chapter 14 opens on a rare sight. Harry wakes up before everyone else. The castle is completely quiet. Sunlight is pouring into Gryffindor Tower, and just for a few minutes, everything actually feels peaceful. After the nightmare that was the first week of school, Harry has a chance to finally breathe. He decides it's time to write Sirius. Only there's a problem. How do you write a letter when you have to assume someone else might read it? I actually like this a little bit because it reminds us the wizarding world has its own version of encrypted communication. Harry can't write, "Hey Sirius, Voldemort's back, Umbridge is insane, Hagrid's missing." Instead, he has to write in code. He addresses the letter to Snuffles, mentions the new defense against the dark arts teacher, mentions our biggest friend still being gone, hints that his scar acted up again. It's careful, it's subtle, and it shows Harry's growing maturity. He's learning the rules of living in a world where information itself can be dangerous. On the way to the Owlry, nearly headless Nick saves Harry from one of Peeves' pranks. Apparently, Peeves plans to drop a giant bust on the next unsuspecting student. Nick sounds completely exhausted describing it, like even ghosts are tired of Peeves. It's a tiny moment, but it adds a little humor before the heavier parts of the chapter. Harry sends Hedwig off with a letter, then looks outward toward Hagrid's empty cabin. Still no smoke, still no sign of him, and at this point, Hagrid's absence is becoming genuinely worrying. And then, Harry sees something that stops him cold. A huge, black, winged horse rises above the Forbidden Forest before disappearing back into the trees. It's exactly like the creatures pulling the Hogwarts carriages. Harry barely has time to process what he saw before someone else walks into the Owlry. It's Cho Chang. Poor Harry. This scene is painfully relatable. He wants to sound cool, interesting, and confident. Instead, he comments on the weather. I mean, it's so familiar. That's all he can think of, the weather. Honestly, who among us hasn't had that kind of conversation, though? Brain has this incredible speech prepared, and somehow all that comes out is, "Nice day." Cho actually makes things easy for him. They start talking Quidditch. She asks about Gryffindor's new keeper, then she brings up Umbridge. And this moment means a lot. Cho tells Harry she's heard what happened in class. She says standing up to Umbridge, telling the truth, was brave. That is exactly what Harry needed to hear. After weeks of being called unstable, attention-seeking, or worse, someone he genuinely likes looks him in the eye and says, "I believe you." It's a small moment, but you could almost feel Harry's confidence coming back for a second. Naturally, the moment can't last. Filch storms in the Owlry, accusing Harry of ordering dung bombs. Apparently, someone tipped him off. Harry has absolutely no idea what Filch is talking about. Cho backs Harry up immediately, and she tells Filch that she literally watched Harry send his letter. Again, Cho stands up for him, and honestly, she earns a lot of points in these chapters. Walking away, Harry is smiling. Not because of Quidditch, not because of Hogwarts, but for the first time in a while, talking to Cho actually felt normal. At breakfast, Ron asks Harry to come practice Keeper with him before the official team training. I really love that Harry immediately agrees. Homework can wait. Helping your best friend build confidence, that's worth a morning. Hermione naturally strongly disagrees. Then comes to another piece of bad news. The Daily Prophet reports that Sirius Black is supposedly hiding somewhere in London. Harry immediately suspects Lucius Malfoy recognized Sirius at King's Cross, which honestly is a really good theory. It also means Sirius is in even more danger than before. Then Harry notices another article, tiny, almost hidden, about Sturgis Podmore. He's been sentenced to 6 months in Azkaban for trying to force his way through a secure ministry door. That punishment feels way too severe. 6 months for a door? Ron immediately wonders if it's a setup, and Hermione doesn't dismiss that idea. Neither do I. The ministry is looking more suspicious by the chapter. Harry and Ron finally head down to the Quidditch pitch before the official practice. Harry spends 2 full hours helping Ron, and that's why I love their friendship. It's blooming in these chapters. Harry never treats it like a chore. He wants Ron to succeed, and he keeps firing quaffles towards the hoops. And Ron actually does pretty well. His confidence starts growing. For a little while, things feel normal again. Unfortunately, the real practice begins, and so do the Slytherins. Malfoy and the entire Slytherin team have shown up just to heckle Gryffindor. Every mistake they celebrate, every dropped pass they laugh at, and every missed save they turn into another chant. Gryffindor are losers, over and over and over. You can actually watch Ron unravel. He starts missing easy catches, passing wildly, forgetting which goalpost he's supposed to defend. And honestly, I felt terrible for him. Confidence is such a strange thing. When you have it, everything feels easy. But the second you lose it, even things you know how to do suddenly become impossible when you get in your head. Meanwhile, poor Katie Bell accidentally takes one of Fred and George's experimental products. Instead of curing her nosebleed, it makes everything much worse. So practice ends early, another disaster, and nobody leaves happy. Back in the common room, Ron immediately assumes everyone thinks he ruined practice. Hermione tries comforting him, but he snaps at her. Not because she's done anything wrong, but because he's embarrassed. Harry quietly defends him. He tells Hermione no, he wasn't terrible. Maybe not perfect, but definitely not hopeless. Sometimes your best friend is the one reminding everyone, including yourself, that one bad day doesn't define you. Sunday becomes homework, and more homework by this point. I don't know how Hogwarts students sleep. Every teacher assigns essays like they're the only class in the school. Honestly, it's enough to stress me out. Late at night, Hermione finally gives in after spending the whole week insisting they manage their own work. She quietly fixes Harry and Ron's essays. Ron immediately thanks her, and I love Hermione's response. She tells them, next time, don't leave it to this late. It's such a Hermione thing. She helps first, lectures second. Then, Herms arrive, Percy's owl. Ron opens the letter, and honestly, this might be one of the coldest things Percy has ever done. Instead of congratulating Ron, he uses Ron's promotion to drive a wedge between him and Harry. He tells Ron to distance himself from Harry, claims Harry's unstable, suggests reporting directly to Umbridge, even hints that abandoning Dumbledore could help Ron become head boy someday. It's heartbreaking, honestly, not just because Percy attacks Harry, but because he attacks his own family. He completely bought into the Ministry's version of reality. Ron doesn't hesitate. He tears the letter up once, twice, again, and again, until it's nothing but tiny pieces. Then he throws it into the fire. I absolutely love that moment. No speech, no dramatic declaration, just no. That's his answer. And Harry needed that. Hermione finally helps them finish the last of their homework. The common room empties. Everything grows quiet. Harry is thinking about Percy's letter, about Sirius, and how lonely all of this has become, when he sees something inside the fire, a face, Sirius Black. He actually came. And what follows might be one of my favorite conversations so far. Sirius immediately tells Harry the scar isn't necessarily anything to panic about. Voldemort is alive now. Strong emotions might simply trigger it more often. Harry asks whether Umbridge could somehow be connected, and Sirius doesn't think so. She's awful, but awful doesn't automatically make someone a Death Eater. And I absolutely love that line because it's true. The wizarding world isn't divided into good people and Death Eaters. Some people are simply just cruel. Sirius explains something incredibly important. Why won't Umbridge teach practical defense against the dark arts? Because Fudge is terrified. Not of Voldemort, but of Dumbledore. The Ministry actually believes Dumbledore is secretly building an army inside Hogwarts. Think about that. The students aren't being denied education because they're dangerous. They're being denied education because politicians are afraid of educated students. That's a really powerful idea. Harry also asks about Hagrid, still missing, and no one knows where he is. Dumbledore isn't panicking, so Sirius isn't either. But everyone clearly wishes Hagrid would just walk back through the castle doors. Then Sirius suggests something. Maybe he'll sneak up to Hogwarts as Padfoot for the next Hogsmeade weekend. Harry and Hermione immediately shut it down. Absolutely not. The risk is far too high. Harry doesn't want to lose Sirius again. And then the conversation ends. With one sentence, Sirius looks at Harry and says, "You're less like your father than I thought." The risk would have been what made it fun for James. That line hurts, not because Sirius means to hurt Harry, but because it reminds us Sirius is still grieving James. Sometimes, without realizing it, he expects Harry to be his father. Harry isn't James Potter, he's Harry. And that's an important distinction Sirius still hasn't fully learned. That closes chapters 13 and 14. Harry now has literal scars on the back of his hand. Ron has officially become Gryffindor Keeper. Percy has chosen the Ministry over his family. And Fudge's paranoia is starting to make a lot more sense. And Sirius, for all his love, shows us that even heroes can have blind spots. These chapters aren't about giant battles or magical creatures. They're about pressure, isolation, friendship, and the slow realization that sometimes the people in power can be every bit as dangerous as the villains everyone already recognizes. Thank you so much for listening to Magic Muggle. Join our Discord server. It is in the About section of this episode. Rate the show. Give it a thumbs up, 5 stars, whatever platform you listen to it on. Give it a review. It will mean the world. We want to get the podcast out there to as many witches and wizards as possible. I'm really looking forward to the next chapters. The book is really starting to heat up. The 12th of July is the official year anniversary of Magic Muggle. Missing 1 to no weeks. We've been going every week for a full year. That's something to be excited about, and thank you for being on this journey with me. And if this is a future person coming along for the ride, hey, I'm so happy you're here. I want this show to last and be there for people who are reading through the series and want an after show when they're reading through it on their own terms in their own time. Happy 1 year anniversary, and until next time, wands down, hearts full.